Welcome to the B'nai B'rith International podcast. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thank you for tuning in today. July 18th will mark the 24th anniversary of the 1994 horrific terrorist attack against the AMIA Jewish Center in Buenos Aires, which killed 85 people and injured hundreds. It was the worst terrorist attack ever suffered by Argentina or any other Latin American country. Alberto Nisman, the federal prosecutor who had been investigating the case, was found dead in his apartment in January of 2015, right after accusing the Argentinian government of giving cover to Iran for planning and executing the bombing via its proxy Hezbollah. Today, I'll be talking with our special advisor on Latin American affairs, Adriana Camisar, who is based in Argentina and who has been covering this case from the very beginning, about a critical recent development in the investigation surrounding Nisman's death. Adriana, welcome to the podcast. What new developments are there in the case?
Well, Dan, as you know, when Nisman was found dead in January of 2015, the government of then President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner suggested that he had committed suicide. This was, of course, very hard to believe, as Nisman did not have a suicidal personality. He did not leave a note, something that most suicidal people do. There were no traces of gunpowder on his hands. And perhaps more importantly, the location of the bullet clearly indicated that someone else had to have pulled the trigger. In addition, this occurred just hours before his scheduled appearance before Congress to expand on his allegations against the government. And yet, the initial investigation seemed to confirm that the government's claim that Nisman had committed suicide. Recently, though, a federal chamber of appeals confirmed the ruling of Justice Ercolini, who, based on a credible forensic investigation, concluded that there was sufficient evidence to establish that Nisman was indeed murdered. In addition, the chamber concluded that Nisman's murder was a direct consequence of his complaint against the former government, which is very important. Now, even though the ruling fell short of incriminating former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, as the attorney representing Nisman's mother had requested, it called on the judge to seriously investigate the homicide. And of course, many believe that Cristina could end up being indicted. So for the first time then, the investigation will focus on the obvious, that Nisman was murdered and that he was murdered because of the serious accusations he had made against the government. Now we will see if the Argentine judiciary is really willing and able to get to the bottom of this.
What is the, let's just go back a bit in time here. Because we're talking about 24 years ago. So perhaps at this point we might go back and take a look at what we know from that moment. So the belief is that Iranian agents were involved in the bombing and that they may have been, partially at least, working out of the embassy in Buenos Aires. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. There's extensive evidence of that. And Nisman had been working on that for more than 10 years until it was murdered. The investigation was concluded. The only thing that prevented the case for, justice for being served is that the Iranians never handed over the suspects to the Argentine justice.
And there, in Argentine law, there is an issue about trying suspects or those who've been charged in absentia. How much has that provision of Argentine law prevented the movement toward justice in this case?
Well, we don't have in Argentina trials in absentia, not yet. And this is why the suspects could not be tried here. But there's a bill in Congress because this government is trying to get that passed. They want Argentina to have that possibility to be able to achieve some measure of justice, but the bill is still in Congress.
Now, some of those Iranian agents or those, let's say, in Tehran who were at a more senior level, who were clearly signing off on this act of terror, they're still around. What can you tell us about them, and what about the prospects now of moving the case forward, given the fact that we're now almost 25 years out of this, with those who were involved in the case 25 years older? How can we get to the bottom of reaching a point of justice in this case?
Well, Dan, as you said, that many of those involved are still around, and they even travel because, as you know, Nisman had secured Interpol red alerts for some of them, but they still travel. We have an example. Just last Wednesday, Ali Akbar Velayati was in Russia. He was meeting with Vladimir Putin, and he was Iran's foreign minister at the time of the AMIA bombing. He was one of the planners. He was present at the meeting of the Supreme Security Council of Iran when the AMIA attack was ordered. And of course, he was one of the key decision makers. And Argentina, the Argentine justice, issued an international request for cooperation back in 2006, but was not able to secure an Interpol red alert against him. Now, Russia and Argentina have an extradition treaty, and so the judge of the case, Rodolfo Canicova Corral, issued an extradition request. But not surprisingly, Russia did not send any response to Argentina, and this person was able to safely leave Russia and go to China from there. And this is the kind of things that happened repeatedly. The way I see it now, Dan, 24 years after the attack, the only way that we could achieve some measure of justice is to have that law about trials in absentia, because we have so much evidence against these people, and Iran will never hand them over to the Argentine justice. So the only way to achieve some closure is to have that law and to be able to judge them in absentia.
And how close are you to that happening or not happening? I mean, what kind of discussion is going on right now in your Congress on this very issue?
Well, I think it's possible. Of course, I cannot assure you that it passed, but I think right now it is possible because of we have many supporters in Congress. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. I know that the government is actively promoting it.
And tell us, in that context, about this memorandum which was signed between Argentina and Iran some years ago. What was the objective there in terms of this case, how it would have affected this case had all of it been carried out?
Right. Well, this is known as the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the government of then President Cristina Kirchner and Iran. And the way the government solved it is that they said that because the case was paralyzed, something needed to be done. And so they had the idea to negotiate this pact with Iran. It was negotiated in secret, by the way. And through this pact, they created what they called the Commission of Truth. And basically, they named people from Iran and from Argentina to jointly investigate the attack. Now, as you can imagine, the people that planned this attack, some of them are still in the government in Iran. So this was clearly a maneuver to cover up their involvement. And of course, the opposition in Argentina and the Jewish community complained. And when President Mauricio Macri took office, the agreement was nullified, fortunately. And but if that would have been a death sentence for the hope to get any justice in the case. And when Nisman, he said, he went publicly and said that this was an attempt to cover up Iran's involvement, and he was found dead a few days later after that.
The 24th anniversary, very hard to believe so much time has passed. How has it been, and how will it be commemorated in Argentina this year?
Well, as every year, the central commemoration event will take place on July 18th in front of the AMIA building. And it will start at 9:53 a.m., the exact time of the bombing 24 years ago. This year, speakers will include the president of AMIA, Agustin Svar, relatives of the victims, and OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro will be the special guest on this occasion. Vice President Gabriela Michetti, Macri's Chief of Staff Marcos Peña, and also Human Rights Secretary Claudio Abruj will attend. President Macri will not attend the event, but will meet privately with the authorities of AMIA. But beyond this central event, AMIA has launched this year 6 artistic initiatives to commemorate the bombing and demand justice. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about them.
Go ahead.
If I may.
Sure.
The first one is a beautiful song and video for children dedicated to the youngest victim of the bombing, a 5-year-old child named Sebastian Barreiros. The second one of these initiatives is a video that imagines what could have been Sebastian's future had he not died in that terrible attack. Sebastian today would be 29 years old. The third one of these initiatives is the recorded testimony of Sebastian's mother, Rosa, in which she remembers the last minutes she spends with her child that day. This is a really heartbreaking testimony to listen to, Dan. The fourth of these initiatives is a beautiful poem titled I Open My Eyes by Luis Alberto Spinetta, a well-known Argentine singer who died in 2012. Spinetta had written this poem a few months after the AMIA attack, but now composer and singer Gabo Ferro made a very touching song using this poem. Then the fifth one of these initiatives is a short monologue about the value of having memory by famous artist and comedian Enrique Pinti. And finally, I wanted to tell you about this one because the sixth of these initiatives is very impressive. It's the so-called Wall of Memory. Artist Martin Ron, who is famous worldwide, made a giant graffiti mural painting on one of the external walls of the building, which is visible from the street. There were 2 thin columns attached to this wall that were the only things from the old building that remained standing after the bombing. Now, using those tiny columns as a central point, this artist created a fantastic painting that honors the victim and claims for justice. The painting features a crowd of people holding up photographs of the dead and shows a young person climbing up the ladder. A ladder. The ladder is made out of those tiny columns. And this person is trying to reach the sky as another person, who is perhaps the same person, tries to climb down. the painting exemplifies the search for justice as well as the connection between heaven and earth. And it's really beautiful. You should see it when you come to Buenos Aires.
Is this the first time that these kinds of programs and projects have been sponsored?
No, it's not the first time, but this year it's they did more things this year. It's really impressive what they have done.
Well, I've visited, as you know, I've visited the AMIA building a number of times, and I'm always moved by the names of the victims that are there, because it just personalizes that terrible terrorist act and that terrible day. You're not from Buenos Aires. You're from Salta.
Yes.
Were you in Argentina that day?
Yes, I was in Salta, but I remember it very vividly.
What can you tell us about when you heard about it? Your reaction to it?
It was just horrible, Dan. It was difficult to believe, and you might remember that it was 2 years after the attack on the Israeli embassy. So I think that many people, but especially the Jewish community, felt that this wasn't a safe place to live in. It was horrible. And then the images of the dead and people trapped in, and the rescuers trying to find people alive. It was horrible. What can I say?
Well, the search for justice continues. B'nai B'rith will be represented at this commemoration. And of course, we have followed this case extremely closely because of our many friends in the community in Argentina. It's extremely important that we not flag in any way in our efforts to see justice done. Those who perpetrated these acts need to finally be brought to justice, whether extradited or, in my opinion, in absentia. A message has to be sent that terrorism does not pay, and we will continue, as I know you will, and you do this. You're living there and follow these issues very closely. That we'll all push to reach that objective. So, Adriana, thank you for being with us. Extremely important to go over these issues on this anniversary, the 24th anniversary of the bombing of the AMIA building. We appreciate your coming on the podcast today.
You're welcome, Ben. It's a pleasure.
And thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Please visit our website, bnaibrith.org, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, subscribe on your smartphone through the podcast app for iPhone or through Google Play for Android. And lastly, tell a friend about us. For my guest, Adriana Camisar, I'm Dan Mariaschin. We'll talk to you next time on the B'nai B'rith International Podcast.